We are a global travel network started by Nomadic Matt back in 2019. We were hosting live community events, in bars and restaurants, hugging each other, 22 plus cities around the globe. And then when coronavirus hit, we pivoted to virtual events. But they were kind of a blessing in disguise because now we get to reach more people multiple times of the day, multiple days a week. From the comfort of wherever you want to be. So right now we're hosting 3 types of events. Speaker events where Laura comes on, she does a little presentation, her and I answer your questions at the end. We also have a book club that's once a month. Our next book club is tomorrow, and I'll get into that after the presentation. We also host regional happy hours, and those are in different cities across the globe. You do not have to live near or in that region to attend one. So they're great for networking and meeting new folks. So a few things to keep in mind. Like we said, we love your faces. We will keep you muted for the duration of the presentation so that we can hear Laura and all of the knowledge she has to offer. We're so grateful that she's here. She's doing this from the kindness of her heart. So thank you, Laura, for taking that time. Feel free to use the chat to connect and share your own experiences and stories. If you have any questions you'd like for us to answer at the end, go ahead, drop them in the chat and start them with question, the word question. And for any replays, you may know that we have moved off the Patreon platform and moved onto our own proprietary site called members.nomadicmat.com. It's Nomadic Mat Plus. So there you will find replays and all other types of perks. So with that being said, we have Laura Cox here today. She is the San Diego chapter leader. She is an expert in family travel. She's taken her kids everywhere. They've gone to about 40 something countries with her, and Laura's been to even more. Her goal is to get to 80 countries by 80 years old. And we're super happy to hear all of your experiences today, Laura. So I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for being here and taking time out of your day, especially after a long weekend for some of us. So I really appreciate that. So before we get into everything, I'm just going to share my screen and hopefully y'all can see that. Yep. Okay, perfect. So before we kind of dive deep into about travel mindfully with kids and how we can go about doing that, I thought I'd give you a quick rundown of who I am. So I grew up in San Diego. I've lived here for most of my life, and I did not do any international travel as a kid. Most of it was spent in our motorhome, just cruising around the US. Yeah, we went to Mexico, across the border, and so that was international, but it wasn't really until I studied abroad in Sevilla, Spain, and that was where I kind of had my first glimpse of what international travel is and experiences that you can have with it. From that, after college, I moved to Prague. I lived there for a year and a half, and that, if you know me really well, everyone knows that Prague is my most favorite place on earth for the most part. And it was just that experience that I had there. I lived, I had to find a place to live. I was independent, fresh out of college. I worked as an event planner, and just having to live with the locals and embrace their culture and customs just really kickstarted my love for travel and experiencing different cultures. And I just wanted so much more of that. And then when I came back home, this woman, so actually in the center picture, this is my friend Melissa, who I went to Prague with. And then the woman in the middle is her grandmother, and she was having her 80th birthday party. And she was celebrating the fact that she had been to 80 countries and she was turning 80 years old. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing ever. I want to have this goal and I want to follow in her footsteps. And so Nana inspired me to kind of do travel 80 by 80 and try to attain that goal through my travels. And I've been so passionate about it ever since. Any chance I can to travel, I will. And one of the things, when we had kids is we didn't want to let having kids stop us from traveling. And, that can be hard to do, but we realized that we want to bring them along on all of our adventures. But I didn't want them to just check the box off that they've been to another country. And even though my goal is to go to 80 countries by the time I'm 80. I don't just want to go there to check the box off. I want to go to really immerse myself and learn from the locals and completely embrace in the customs and cultures and all of that. And so I wanted my kids to learn this as well and have these wonderful adventures and find purpose in traveling and meaning, and maybe go to destinations that we might not normally go to. So we have decided to bring them along on all of our adventures. And this is kind of a fun little grid to show you the path that we have taken. So it has been about 14 years since we've been traveling together. The kids are 13 and 15 right now, and we have been to 46 countries to date. So the first one, so kind of the same as me, was Mexico. That was their first international trip. I don't really count it as a major international trip because it's just driving across the border for us here. So I really count Brazil as their first international trip. That was when they were 4 and 6, and that was a huge, excursion for us to go to a whole different part of the world, something that we weren't familiar with. And then since then, as you can see, it's been a fun ride to go to all these different places and have these wonderful experiences with them. So since we're talking about mindful travel, I think we should focus a little bit on what to be mindful actually means. So it's to be conscious or aware of something, and it's to focus one's awareness on the present moment. So I think a lot of being mindful is being, engaged and being curious, being aware, being respectful. So I think it's so important to incorporate mindfulness into your travels with kids and to teach them to not only enjoy the destination that they're going to, but also the journey. So this little grid here is kind of just a way to think about, when you're traveling with your kids, there's so many different experiences that you'll have with them and how you think mindfully in terms of your experiences with them and your interactions with others. And so throughout this presentation, I'll be talking a little bit about how it can change from age group to age group. Most of them you can find things that will span across the different ages, but some things to keep in mind. So for toddlers, this is a time when a lot of people will really start, if they're going to do a trip, this might be one of the first times they do it. And stress levels are really high. This is the first time that you've ever traveled with someone besides maybe your spouse or partner or friend, and you have to bring so much gear, or unless you want to rent it, but the planning and the stress that goes along with that is just a huge factor. And so you really have to set your mind to that and just plan for the unknown. It just takes on a whole different level. So that's one way to think about it when you're traveling with toddlers. Then when they become more kids, I like to say, and this is what I think of the ages, maybe from 6 to 12. There's such a sense of wonder and excitement in kids this age. They just, looking through the world and experiencing with them at this point is so amazing. Everything is just new and magical and exciting. But they can get quite cranky. They can go, and you might think they're so excited about seeing everything, and you forget that they're little. They need this downtime and they need to take breaks. So just be mindful of the situations you're putting your kids in and to step back and pause a little bit as well. Okay, and then for teens, so this is where I am right now. So my kids are 13 and 15. They're about to have birthdays this month, so they'll be 14 and 16. And this is where the attitude can set in. This is where there's a lot of pushback on going on the trips. They might want to stay back and hang out with their friends, and they don't want to miss their sporting team event that they're part of. And so it's really setting your mind and trying to, give this attitude to the kids as well. And I think once they get there on the trip, they are so appreciative. They love being there. They enjoy every moment of it. But make sure you give them downtime. Take away their devices if you can. Give them some space to just have time to really enjoy the surroundings. All right, so when I thought about what it is to be mindful in your travels, the word that kept coming to mind was pause. So I kind of broke this presentation down into this area of pause. So the first is to participate in the community, to appreciate and be aware, to unplug, to slow down, and to engage with the locals. So this first area and participate in the community, this is a huge one. So I'm actually going to spend a little bit of time in this particular area because I think it's so important that when you're planning these trips with your kids, no matter where you go in the world, it's so important to immerse yourself and put yourself in these situations where you are absorbing and being surrounded by the community. And one way that I think you can do this is by giving back. This is such a mindful approach, and you can do it in such the simplest form as just bringing supplies to either a local school, or for example, this first picture you see on the left, we had just visited the Bahamas after the 2019 hurricane. And we knew that their families were still in need of supplies. So we just packed a big suitcase filled with supplies for the families, and we're able to bring that and donate it. And, it's something simple to do. So many places in the world need that. And there's so many different ways you can find out of how to give back in that sense. And then the other area I think is what is so important about giving back is, there's no better experience than actually helping those that you are interacting with and giving back to at that one moment. And when we were in Brazil, we had this opportunity to volunteer, I guess you could say, at an orphanage. And so again, we packed these supplies, toys, brought them down, and the kids were able to spend an afternoon, giving these gifts to the children, playing with them and getting to see how these kids live. And I think for my children, it was such an eye-opening experience because they didn't realize that other families live differently than us and don't necessarily have a mom and dad. And so being able to engage and understand how other children in the world live can be very impactful for kids at that age. And then the last way I think of when you can give back is you can do the work. So a lot of times, you can, when you're on these trips, it's all about play and having fun and seeing the sights. But sometimes if you put a little bit of work in, it can be really meaningful. This was actually also in the same trip that I wanted to talk about. This is in a favela in Brazil and Rio, and these are one of the really poor areas. And so being able to be there and help paint a community center and have my children realize that they're creating a space for these people in this community to have the safe space to go to. And when we're driving into the area, they could just see it was a completely different world than what my kids were used to living in. So those are some ways I think is really important when you're traveling. If you can think about giving back, there's some more simple, to more complex ways that you want to get involved with that. All right, staying local. So for us, I love to stay in the, off the beaten paths, the more local neighborhoods, and we try to normally stay in Airbnbs if we can. And I think for this, it's really important because you get a glimpse of the neighborhood and the local life. And sometimes you get to learn a little bit about the history you might not have known that existed right where you are, and learn from some stories from locals that you interact with. So this first picture is actually Tyler. He's sitting here in Malta. We stayed in just this neighborhood across from the main area of town. But what I love about staying in these local communities is you really get to experience what they do on a daily basis. You get to go shop at the same grocery store and get to know the locals there and see the regulars. And just even though maybe you're not necessarily a part of the community, you get to feel like you're a part of it. So I really encourage you to try to find those off the beaten path locations if you're able to. And then these middle pictures were when we stayed in Dubrovnik in Croatia. And I love this story. So our host was walking us up to if you've been to Dubrovnik, there's a lot of stairs. So we had to climb quite a bit of a ways to get up there. And as he was walking, he was explaining the story to us about the war that had gone on and what his father had to endure. And then he shows us this wall, and literally the front door to our place is just a few feet to the right. And he asked the kids, do you know what those holes are? And they didn't. And he said, those are bullet holes during the war. The guns they were shooting, and this is how close it came to our house. And I think for my kids to hear this history and live in this place, even though, it was many years later, just to be aware of what some other communities in the world have gone through, and just to be mindful to that, and just be respectful as well. And it's just another eye-opening experience. So if you can find those opportunities to stay in local districts, it's just a wonderful way for the children. And then this last picture I just had to throw in, because I think when you have these opportunities to stay at Airbnbs or even anywhere, just, take the chance to talk to the locals. This particular Airbnb host, when we showed up, there were pictures on the wall. So we started talking, and we realized he was one of the most famous ice hockey players in Slovenia. Of course, my husband and my son Tyler were just overjoyed to chat with him, and we got to sit down and hear some of his stories and things that maybe we wouldn't have been able to if we were just staying in a larger hotel. All right, so embracing the culture. So this one is hugely important for me, and I think this is something you can do across the ages, really with your kids. And this can be from broom making or bucket fishing in Vietnam to picking the coffee cherries on coffee farms in Colombia. So it's really about having those hands-on experiences and learning about the different industries of the villages or towns that you're going to. And it's a lot of fun for the kids. And there were some of these things, of course, that we had heard about. Some of these things we never even knew existed. And so it's just fun to actually get this hands-on, get down and dirty and learn what the locals are doing and how they contribute to their society. And so I have to chat about these middle photos. So I don't know if anyone has ever heard of bucket fishing. If you have, you can, chat and mark it down in the chat box. But basically, this was in a rural village in Vietnam, and you get in this whole garb, and then you take this bucket and you literally have to go through the water and you just push the bucket down into the water, or basket, so to speak. And if you're lucky, a fish will be caught. And then the next step is you have to put your hand in there and grab it with the glove. So Riley was really the only successful one out of all of us. She grabbed that fish. Tyler, I think, got his hand on one, but couldn't grab it. And Steve and I were not so lucky. But it was such a great way for the kids to see a whole different way of fishing. And, you know, we learned some other aspects of being in that village, of how what the tools that they use, that are completely different to us. And so it's just a way to step back and realize a little bit more about the neighborhoods and the communities that you're visiting. All right, and then embracing the culture can also be about learning about entertainment. So, you know, you can do this in a variety of ways. We have found by going to sporting events throughout the world have been really fun. We've done baseball and soccer games, but these two particular ones I just wanted to chat about real quick. Oh, and I should mention, you know, entertainment can also be, you know, going to a play, a musical, a puppet show. That, you know, there's so many different ways you can do this with the kids. So when we were in Argentina, they were really young at this time, and they'd probably been to a sporting event here in the States before, but this one, when you go to, you had to go through 2 metal detectors. So after we did that, we thought, okay, this is going to be a little bit different of an experience, so definitely making sure we're really safe. And then just a little bit to the right of us in that picture, there was a wire fence which separated us from the away fans. And so it was, you know, it was definitely a rambunctious group. I'm glad that my kids probably didn't know that much Spanish at the time, because you know, I think it was definitely on the borderline of offensive comments, but to be able to be there and be absorbed in the culture and, you know, hear everything that was going on and witnessing it and just being a part of that is just such a wonderful way that you can really, you know, dive deep into knowing the place that you're visiting. And then this last picture on the bottom of the screen was when we were in Cuba. And so this is, we actually learned a little bit of lesson from this I'll share with you at the end, but when we were there, we wanted to go to a baseball game. We couldn't figure out how to do it. So we asked our host if he knew how, and we came to find out that he had never been to a baseball game before. So we decided, well, let's take him to the game with us. We'll pay for his ticket, and then he can help us, you know, arrange the transportation and get the tickets. And it was amazing. So obviously for us, having the enjoyment of being at the game, and again, just being around, you know, the Cubans was so phenomenal. But more so was being able to witness him having this experience that he had never had before, and being him surrounded with his culture and getting to see what a game was like. So we found so much joy in that. And I think the one thing we've learned is that if we ever have that opportunity to do something like that again, you know, we're going to try to reach out to a local, because sitting there and enjoying the game and seeing what they're learning, and especially for him, since it was his first time, and the people that he was telling us about, and just the overall experience, it's just a great way to do it. So I'd highly recommend, if you can ever invite a local and pay for their ticket to go to a game, do it. All right, food. So I know everyone loves food, and what is not a better way than to really get into the culture than by experiencing food. And I think there's so many ways you can do this. You know, it goes all the way from shopping at the local markets to making it yourself, and then just to the different variety that it has to offer. So I think, you know, at most places you go to, they're going to have these local markets. And I don't know if anyone has a favorite market they've ever been to. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. But some of ours were this one in Vietnam, and then this bottom one when we were in Morocco. And I think just being able to go through the market, you know, you get all the senses, the sights, the smells, the sounds, just seeing how the locals engage in what they do on a day-to-day basis is just, it's just a great way to kind of step back and watch and participate if you can. This is here, Riley, she was purchasing some supplies for the cooking class that we had done. So that's another way, if especially for children, I think it's such a great way for them to really appreciate and enjoy the food of the location that you're traveling to. And I don't know about you guys with your kids, but my Riley in particular is quite picky. And so a lot of times when we travel, she might not be the person who wants to try all of the food. If we're in Italy, she'll try it all. My son, he will try it all. But in Vietnam, we decided to take this cooking class. It was just a private class for she and I. And it was amazing, because here, you know, in that top left picture, she got to go to the market and pick all the ingredients, and then she had to make something that she probably would have not eaten, and to have to, learn what these different ingredients might be, cook the food, eat it, and appreciate that this is what people in Vietnam eat on a regular basis, and to really be mindful of that. And she walked away really enjoying it, and I think that's just a great way to get your kids involved and to really appreciate the food and the community. And you can do it, in small private sessions if you want to hire a chef, to larger group sessions as well. And then this last picture is more about being mindful with the food and when you're traveling and with the different situations you're in. So if you don't know, my son Tyler, he has a peanut allergy, and Vietnam was always a place we never thought we would go. It was so far out of reach. We knew there was a lot of peanuts in all the food, and we were just so terrified to travel there. But we realized if we can be mindful in our approach and do the planning ahead of time, talk with the locals, really make sure we are prepped and aware, we can make it a wonderful experience. And so having Tyler, so this was this food tour we went to 5, different stands throughout Hanoi and Vietnam, and being able to have Tyler experience this as a kid with a food allergy is something that we never thought we'd do, was just amazing. So I think, you have to remember that you can still have those experiences no matter what. If you have a picky eater or a kid with a food allergy, try to find the ways, be mindful in how you approach it to find the ways that work for you and your families, but really getting them to dive deep and eat and experience the food is a wonderful way. All right, and then my last area and participate in the community is by learning to dance. So what kid doesn't love to dance, at all ages, maybe not as teens so much, but this can be from such a small, private, semi-private group class. This is one we did in Argentina. We did the tango, and we had this small group class, okay, so this picture here is of a gentleman. He's dancing with Riley. I think he had realized that my husband and I probably couldn't do so well. This was at the end of the class. So he asked if she wanted to dance and taught her, which was so wonderful. So just to have that experience of really embracing in the culture of what these people do on a day-to-day basis, and how important dance is to them in this culture, was wonderful for her to experience at that young age. And then you can go on a larger scale. So here, this middle photo is when we were in Brazil. So we had actually traveled there the week before Carnival. And so we missed Carnival, which was probably fine at their age. But what we didn't realize at the time is that at the Samba Drum, they had the parade route. This is where we were. And all the parades, all the dancers, they will go through, the samba schools will go through and practice and rehearse. They just won't have their costumes on. So we got to sit back and watch what was going on and really embrace ourselves and absorb everything that was going on, and be a part of, a week prior, but be a part of one of the largest festivals that they have in their country. And that is so important to all of them there. And so if you can find experiences like that, doesn't have to be on such a large scale, but go to those festivals. It's such a great way for the kids to really see what is out there, and besides, where they're living currently. And then the last way is you can fully immerse yourself. So this was more of a lucky. When I'd studied in Sevilla, I kept in touch with my good friends, and they invited us back to the feria. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but that is the festival in Sevilla every April. And this, they decked us out in all the flamenco gear. We got to go from tent to tent and dancing the flamenco with all different people, all different ages. Riley and Tyler were just dancing flamenco with everyone that they would meet in these different tents. And so I think my advice for this is, if you have any friends in other countries or anywhere, ask them about these experiences. Don't be afraid to ask, and be curious and find out what's going on in their local area, and see if you can get an invite and get to try this. All right, so now we're switching to the A part of pause, which is appreciate and be aware of your surroundings. So I think it's so important to pause and embrace and really enjoy all the surroundings. And so many times we just go with these set schedules. So really make sure you give yourself downtime to just, look around and see what is out there. And I think, what is equally important is how you show up in these surroundings and how you can be self-aware. It's so important, I think, to be empathetic and respectful when you're in these different communities. And it's also important, I think, to be aware of how our kids' actions might affect others. So this first time this was hugely evident to me was when the kids were little and they were babies. And if anyone has ever been on a plane with a baby, whether it's your own or someone else's, it's stressful. It's stressful if you're nursing. It's stressful, thinking if they're going to cry or kick the seat in front of them or have a tantrum, whatever it is. And for me, when I started traveling, that was the most stressful thing about the trip. And so we were very aware of how my kids' actions would be, accepted around with the other folks that were sitting on the plane. So what we did is we created these little goodie bags, which consisted of, earplugs, gum, lollipop, a little crossword puzzle, just something small. And it was our way to show everyone that, hey, we are doing the best we can. Please be patient with us, have a little bit of grace. And I think by going in with that mindful approach, it made everyone else around us appreciative, and we were all able to just enjoy and be aware that we were all kind of looking after, or they knew that we were looking after the experience and hoping that it would be positive for all. And then the last thing, which I think is hugely important, is when you're going to these different countries, is make sure you're aware of the local customs, because it's not going to be how it is in your neighborhood. And so this is when we were in Morocco. It was 120 degrees in the desert, and we wanted to respect the culture. So we put the pants on and we wore the shirts that covered our shoulders, and we made sure we did as the locals did. And I think that's really important to do. You might not know of it before you get there, but just make sure you're paying attention and being aware of the surroundings and follow what the locals do, because I think it's really important as we're visiting their country to be very respectful around that. All right, so unplug and live in the moment. So this one I think is very fitting for our day and age. We are all so, set with technology. It encompasses us. We always have that phone in our hand. And so I think if we can put those devices down, and just live in the moment, and those devices takes away from the mindful tendencies that we might have. So this photo here, the one on the left, this is when we were in Cuba. Love that we stayed in this building. It was crazy, but you can't really see underneath that tree, those trees, there was a huge crowd of people every day. And we always wondered what they were doing. And it turned out this was the only place that they had Wi-Fi. And now we knew when we were going to Cuba, it might be difficult, but we didn't know how difficult. So we made the conscious choice that, we are just going to unplug for the entire week that we are there, no phones. And what a difference it makes when you're actually walking through the town, and you're not looking down, but you're actually looking up and you're enjoying your surroundings. And some of the experiences that I'll talk about later, I think came from that. We had the time to be mindful of everything that was going on around us. We didn't have to worry about going back and checking our schedule or seeing if we missed an email or something on social media. So it's just a way to kind of de-stress and live in the moment. And so I highly encourage everyone, if you can do it, even if it's just for a day or two or a couple hours, try to do it when you're on your trips. Then this middle picture. Okay, so this kind of brings up some good and bad emotions for me. So this was about technology. So we were in Cambodia, and the kids woke up in the morning, they were on their iPads. They did not want to get off. And I don't know if all of you with kids ever, had that experience as well, but once the kids are on their devices, it's very hard to get them off. They are distracted. They don't pay attention. Took a lot of convincing and a lot of motivating, and we finally got them out, and we were going to explore this, or we were going to visit this community in Vietnam or in Cambodia. And as soon as the kids got there, this group of children ran up to them. They were so excited, so happy. They just wanted to play. Here on this picture, Riley's concentrating on trying to teach this girl a handshake. And just for that afternoon, they were just walking and playing and talking and just, living as kids do without devices. And when we left the village and we got in the car, Riley and Tyler looked at us and said, wow, we have never seen kids so happy. And we know they don't have any phones or iPads. They probably don't have TVs. They probably don't even have electricity in some of these places, to be honest. And I think it was such an eye-opening experience for the kids that, wow, they don't have to have these devices to be so happy. And it was just one of those, appreciate moments and learn how others live in the world, and realize that you don't need everything that you have, and just to be appreciative and mindful of how others are. And then this last photo is truly one way that you can just unplug. So we were in Fiji, and same thing. We did not have Wi-Fi. We didn't have phones. There were no TVs. There weren't really even clocks. Fiji, they call it Fiji time. So it's just kind of stuck on the one hand and minute. And this woman every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner would just drum the drums. And that was when we knew we had to go for our mealtime. We don't normally travel this way. It was probably a little bit more luxurious than ever, but it was amazing because we had no concept of time. We had no concept of schedule, no concept of technology, nothing holding us back. And we were just able to be completely there, completely enjoying the island we were on. You know, we played games with the locals, got to really know them, spent the evenings with them rather than rushing back to the room to get on the devices. So I think that is the epitome of unwinding and living in the moment if you can do that. All right, so this kind of also flows into slow down. So I think it's really important to slow down and be mindful of your kids' needs and take a break if you need to. And plan for the unexpected. So this top photo on the left is one of my favorite photos for some reason, but the story behind this is we were in Croatia and we decided to take a day trip to Montenegro. We had to drive there, take a car ferry. We explored a little on the way. And when we finally got to Montenegro and we're walking around, Tyler had had enough. So he just sat down in the middle of the road. And this was his cue to us that I'm done, you know, enough is enough. And while we had so many other ideas of things we wanted to do, this was just a day trip for us. There were so many other things we wanted to see in this town, but we took that moment to realize, okay, is it worth it to take our child kicking and screaming and he's not going to have a good experience? We're not going to have a good experience. We're not going to appreciate what we're seeing. Or is it better to just slow down, take a break, and be aware of what our kids needs and be mindful to that? So we just went to a local restaurant, sat down, and to be honest, even though we saw so many amazing things in Montenegro, I think having that moment at that restaurant, just in, you know, small little alleyway of this neighborhood, having the time as a family to just chat, recharge our batteries is the experience I remember the most from that particular trip. So make sure you slow down and plan for the unexpected. And then this middle photo, I think, relates to, you know, sometimes the greatest experience we have had is when we have left space in our schedule. So when we were in Paris, we were only there for 48 hours. And you know, Paris, there's so many things you can do. You're not going to see it all in 48 hours. We knew that. So we decided on one of the afternoons to just get a baguette, some cheese. We picked up a soccer ball for the kids and we just sat under the Eiffel Tower and they just kicked the ball around and just had a day relaxing and enjoying maybe what a local Parisian would do. And all of a sudden, this woman, she was a college student and she was actually a soccer player at the university there in Paris. She just got up and started playing soccer with the kids, and she probably played an hour for them, played an hour with them. And I think it was one of those moments where we look back on that trip and yes, you know, they saw the Eiffel Tower, they saw so many wonderful things. There were so many other things though that we missed. And I don't think the kids or us were sad that we missed seeing that other church or that museum. Having this moment, you know, being surrounded with the locals, having this engagement with the local was so important. So make sure you schedule, you know, time to slow down in your travels as well. Okay, and then I just had to throw in this last picture because I think it's very funny and fitting that here's Tyler, you know, maybe 5 or 6 over there in Montenegro. Fast forward to just a couple of years ago when the kids are teens, we were in Italy with the cousins and they had had enough. And even though I have always tried to approach travel mindfully, this was a wake-up call to me that, all right, Laura, you need to slow down and be aware that the kids have had enough and they need to take a break. So you got to listen to the cues that your kids give you as well. All right, so then the last area I wanted to talk about was engaging with the locals. So this is such a huge way that you can be mindful in your travels. And one way you can do it is in the public. So I think one of the hardest parts of traveling with kids, in my opinion, is the fear of their safety. But in reality, it's the best way to instill trust. And this is really, really hard to do. One of the simplest ways we have found is kind of having kid-to-kid engagement, where the kids can interact with children their own age. So when we've been on trips, we've tried to find these playgrounds, and you can find, obviously, playgrounds are all over the world, but what a wonderful way for your kids to just get out there and see how other kids in the world play. And this top photo was when we were in Argentina. Riley knew a little bit of Spanish. She'd been taking some classes, I guess you could say, but she knew enough that she could sort of communicate with some of phrases. So this little girl and her just had this afternoon of running around trying to chat as best as they could in Spanish. And Riley just got a glimpse into what this local girl, what her life was like, and just being very aware and mindful of that. And I think that applies to adults too. Whenever we travel, if you can learn a little bit of the language as well, just enough to get by, just show that the community that you're visiting, that you're trying, and you're trying to interact with them as best as you can. I think that's really important. And then I think a lot of times when you're engaging with the locals, you have to trust the situation. So these middle photos are when we were in Cambodia, and the kids, we were in this hotel, and every so often they would go down and they would just chat with this doorman. And I didn't really realize what was going on until maybe a couple of days later when they were down there with him for hours. I don't know how he didn't get in trouble, but he literally would stand there and he did his job, when people would come in, but he would stand the rest of the time just chatting with my kids, and they would share these stories. And here this gentleman who's probably in his, early 20s, they were able to understand about his life. He shared all these stories with them. My kids shared them, and they had this whole friendship that they developed just over a couple hours of getting to know each other. And it's hard to tell in this picture, but these are some photos that he drew them, and it basically, is the three of them, and basically saying what a great friendship that they've had and that they developed. So I think, trust the situation you're in, trust that your kids know what they're doing as well, and trust that they can engage with the locals too. You don't always have to set up the experiences for them. And then this last set of pictures is where you kind of have to trust other adults with your kids. And this is especially hard when you're traveling in other countries. It brings a whole extra level of trust, but it's also instilling a sense of independence. So it's probably not for everyone. Maybe it's something we shouldn't have done, but we did. We trusted our gut, and we trusted the folks we were with. And so we went for these experiences. And both of these were in Vietnam. So that top one, we were staying in this local village, which I'll talk about in this moment. And the woman who kind of helped organize the homestay for us, she brought us there, and she said, hey, why don't I let Riley and Tyler get a sense of what the whole village is like? And the only way I can do that is if they ride on the back of the moped with me. So Steve and I looked at each other and we thought, okay, do we really want our kids riding off in this community without us? But we said, all right, so there they go. They went off and they had the best time. And when they came back, they had smiles on their faces. They said they got to meet, some of their friends. They got to wave, see different parts of the community that they might not have seen. And it was just a wonderful way for them to have that quick moment of feeling like a local. So sometimes you got to trust a little bit to have those experiences. And then this bottom photo was also in Vietnam when we were in Hanoi, and we did the food tour I talked about. We actually went to each of those places on the back of these mopeds, and there was a driver for each of us. So each of us were on the back of one of them. And if you've been in Hanoi, Vietnam, it's crazy. The streets are crazy. They're packed. There's at nighttime, you can completely get lost. And so we had to trust that these adults were going to keep our kids safe and get them to the destination, and that we weren't going to get lost. But what an amazing experience it was. So just be trustful, engage with the locals as much as you can. And I think you and your kids will walk away with some wonderful experience and friendships. And then the final way, I think, is, no matter how you go out and see the world, I think walking a day in the shoes of a local is one of the best ways that you can do this, and by viewing their private life. So these first photos are when we were in a small island called Beckway in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And this taxi driver picked us up. His name is Budsy. And we just fell in love with him. He ended up being our driver to and from locations the whole stay. But what was so wonderful is just for knowing him for these short car rides, he invited us to go to this restaurant that locals, or only locals, knew about, no tourists. It was a place where his friends worked. He introduced us to them. He introduced us to his wife. He let us have a glimpse into his life. And I think that is one of the best experiences that you can have if you're giving trust, if you're trusting the locals and if they're trusting you and letting them a little bit into your life. It can be so meaningful. All right, the second photo, I think or the middle photos, I have to say my one piece of advice whenever you travel is say yes to any invitation you might get, because you don't know where it will lead you. So when we were in Cuba, this was not the host who we had brought to the baseball game. This was actually, he, I guess, worked for the Airbnb company, so to speak, and he helped arrange our house. And I told him I wasn't really sure what to do in Havana. And so he said, well, why don't you just come meet me for coffee in the center of Havana. And we'll kind of I'll give you an idea of what you guys could do. So we went and met him, and then we were so surprised to see that his wife and his son was there as well. And what turned into what we thought was going to be just a 30-minute coffee meetup, it was an afternoon of wandering through Havana with himself and his family, turned into a dinner out after that. And then they invited us back the next day to their village. And so for us, being welcomed into someone's home, a stranger's home that we barely knew, for our kids to, go to this, different community. I mean, it's a very different neighborhood than what Riley and Tyler are used to here in San Diego, and having lunch in their home and being able to eat the food that they eat every day, and playing outside with the local kids and just getting to experience that life was really eye-opening for the kids, and just such a wonderful way to embrace the culture and be a part of it. So if you ever get an invite, say yes. And then the last reason last way I think that you can 100% practice mindfulness when traveling is to really live with a family and fully immerse yourself. So as I mentioned, when we were in Vietnam, we had the opportunity to stay in this village and stay with this family, and we got to experience everything that they do. We ate the food that they prepared for us. Riley got to cook in the kitchen. In that bottom photo, that is the kitchen. Chickens, were running around. That was our meal the next day. So the kids really got to see a lot of that, and just embrace everything that was going on in this community. And while our host didn't speak any Vietnamese, we didn't speak any English, we communicated by cheersing. And, one night Riley and Tyler got up and shared some songs and dances that they knew from back home. And then our Vietnamese hosts were able to share songs and dances from their culture. So it was just this wonderful way to give back to each other about sharing and being mindful to each of our own cultures and experiences, and just fully immersing. So if you ever have an opportunity to do that, I'd highly recommend it if you can. That is about it. I think, when you are walking this path of mindful travel, it's so important to practice gratitude, embrace all of the experiences, and just enjoy your time together. And I think this quote pretty much sums up what mindful travel is all about. So travel isn't always pretty. It isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it hurts. It even breaks your heart, but that's okay. The journey changes you. It should change you. It leaves marks on your memory, on your consciousness, on your heart, and on your body. You take something with you. Hopefully you leave something good behind. So I think that is just the epitome of what mindful travel is all about. And that is it. Thank you all so much for listening. This is just different ways that you can get in touch with me. And I should let you know, I'm super excited. I actually finally just launched my blog. This has been many years in the making. So this is just kind of a screenshot of it. And hopefully I can have more tips on how to travel mindfully and other ways to travel with kids. So thank you everyone for being here. And if there were any questions, I am happy to have them.
Yay! Thank you so much, Laura. That was such a thorough presentation on so many different parts of how we can travel mindfully with kids of every age. So I dropped Laura's contact information in the chat as well. She's literally Travel 80 by 80 everywhere. And actually, since we are a small group today, I love these intimate groups. You can, if you want, you can go off mute, everyone, and just ask Laura your question, and we can just, I know, Shauna. But yeah, since it's a small group, it'll be easy to just chat out loud. I know people were dropping questions in the chat, but if you'd want to ask Laura yourself, Shauna, did you want to go first?
I had dropped a question in the chat, but of course it was mid-presentation, so no chance to actually get an answer. You mentioned that your son has a peanut allergy, and my son has an egg allergy. So I have, like, there are countries that I thought, I don't think we can go there. Like, how did you deal with it when you don't speak the language, or did you learn phrases in the language, the local languages, to say no peanuts, it'll kill him, that kind of thing?
Yes, so that was a little scary. So anytime we travel, whatever country it is, we'll take little laminated cards that basically say he has a peanut allergy, and we'll have the logo of the peanut on it just to make sure. It's still very scary. I know people that have gone, other people, travelers with kids that have food allergies that have gone back to talk to the chef and actually show the card to make sure that that gets communicated, because you get nervous it could be lost between the server and the chef. That was really the only time that we were really nervous about the peanuts. And which is funny, I was so nervous about going to Vietnam, but actually it was in Thailand that there were way more peanuts than what we expected. And we were actually there on Christmas, and we ate in like a pizza place, I think. And so, whatever, you had to do what you had to do. But yeah, I think just being aware, having those little cards. The other thing I will do is I will, wherever we're going, I will make sure I know where all the local hospitals are or medical clinics, and just in case. And I'll make sure the transportation that I need to get there. It takes a little bit more work, but it just eases the stress for me, so I'm aware. Eggs is tricky though. I get that. I think a lot. That's a hard one because a lot of dishes are prepared with eggs. How have you done that in the past?
Well, I mean, we've done a lot of, when they were little, we did a lot of resort staying because it's the same people cooking every day and they have protocols in place. Same with if we went to someplace like, Disney, they're very used to dealing with food allergies. That wasn't a problem. We have not we've been to Mexico, and we generally have stuck to things like grilled meat, generally not egg in it, but with baked goods is usually our biggest problem. So we'll go with like, steamed rice, possibly not the breads, that kind of thing, because you never know if there's an egg wash or something. We have to be careful about things like ice cream and any kind of dough, and it's kind of a pain. But like I have a sticker that I made that had, when he was really little, I used to slap a sticker on him that was like the egg, like the no peanut symbol. I made one with eggs, and then I just made it into a bunch of stickers, and then slap a sticker on him if we were traveling in places where English wasn't a common language. But yeah, we've gone to a lot of English speaking places as a result. Like we went to Hawaii, that kind of thing.
Right, and I think that's good. That's important. That's a good way to ease into it. And then I don't think I answered your one question about how we did it. So, and for Vietnam in particular, since we arranged a food tour and we worked with a company, they made sure ahead of time that the places we were going to were fully aware. So that was what I had to do for my comfort level, especially in going to more of these remote places. I think if I was just going to maybe a mainstream restaurant or a restaurant in a hotel, I might be more comfortable with that. Still nerve-wracking, but yeah. Good luck though. It's hard to travel with a kid with a food allergy.
Well, he'll be 13 this week. So as he gets older, we get a little less worried. When he was little and couldn't communicate that well, it was harder, but now he can be a little more independent.
And I'll tell you, some of the times where you don't expect it to happen, it does. So we had, we went to Morocco and we did the Sahara Desert camel trek. And I think you saw in one of those photos. We did not think there were going to be any peanuts. We knew we were very remote though. So I had planned in advance. I knew where the hotel or the hospitals were. And the tour organizers knew not to have any nuts no matter what. And so before we embarked on the camel trek, they put out this little like pastry, I guess you could say. And I tried it. I didn't notice anything, but the next one had something in it, which we think was a little bit of peanut. So here we are in the middle, in the desert. And luckily he was fine. It was such a small amount. He was able to just have Benadryl, but it was one of those, oh my gosh, I've done everything possible to be aware and plan for this scenario. And it happened anyway. So it's a little scary, but got to have everything, have all the medicine and situations worked out ahead of time in case you need them.
Thanks.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
I wasn't sure if you could hear me. How did you find some of your more remote homestays or local places to stay?
So the one that we stayed in Vietnam. So kind of obsessed with travel or TripAdvisor for some reason, and I will I will do tons of research. I will not just look at I will read all of the reviews to make sure they're legitimate, and then I'll kind of cross-reference. And the one in Vietnam, I believe I found it through TripAdvisor, and I was just reading about all these folks that had, actually that one was you could go and you could visit this village. And then a lot of people just visit the village. And I started reading that, there was this opportunity. You could also stay in these different homes if you wanted to. And so that was kind of how it went into that portion. But most of the places we stay are just through Airbnb. And I just try to pick places that are a little bit outside of the more touristy areas, close enough still that, we walk everywhere. I make my kids walk everywhere. Probably drives them crazy. So we stay far enough away that we can walk. And, but still get there if need be. Did that answer your question? I hope.
Yeah, my husband does most of the research, and he sometimes finds these really great opportunities that I'm always amazed at the stuff that he finds. But homestays and like the village in Vietnam seemed really very interesting. So it's interesting. I usually think of TripAdvisor as more mainstream kind of places.
Yes, I think you just have to dive deep. So like I said, I just kept reading and reading, and then I finally saw something. I'm sure I'm blanking on the name of it, but I'm sure there are groups that organize homestays. I've just tended to do more of the research on my own to figure it out, but I'm sure there's plenty of travel advisors, that could help with that as well.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Yeah. Hopefully you get that experience. If anyone has any other questions, you can let me know.
Ed had a question, but sometimes Ed works late. So maybe just read.
I'm here. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. There. Sorry. I have been. Hey, how's it going? I was multitasking a little bit, so that's why I had the camera up. But yeah, my question was like about to what extent you allow your kids, or like you take your kids' suggestions as to like, if they say I want to do this today, or even if like you're planning a trip and they say I want to go here, like do you find that maybe if you build a trip around them, do you feel like they're more engaged, or they just go with the flow and do whatever you plan out?
To be honest, they're pretty go with the flow. There's definitely some pushback, but as they have gotten older, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I forgot to mention that in the presentation, but it has been important, and we have tried to, let the kids know, okay, this is the location we're going to go to, do the research and pick some activities that you think would be enjoyable to do, certain constraints, obviously money and safety, but yes, they have done that. And I do think it helps them get excited for the trip and learn about the different activities that there are to do, and really choose what would be good for them, and what we can do as well. So yes, I would definitely highly recommend that they do that. I know your daughter's 5, so
She's 5.
Yeah, that might be a little hard, but still, it's not so hard if you could also give, put on your computer a couple different things, and then you could show her, hey, look, these are the different things we can do. What do you think would be fun for you to do if we go there?
Sure.
And yeah, just I highly recommend trying to get them involved as early as possible, because then they'll have such a love and excitement for that country or whatever destination you're visiting.
Yeah, my daughter's like, she says things like, I want to go to Australia. I'm like, where did you get that from? She probably learned it in school or whatever. And it's like, yeah, we want to go to Australia, but it moved up in the hierarchy because she said it, so it's like, okay, maybe we can go to Australia sooner rather than later if she's going to be that engaged in it. So that's probably what I was curious about. Do you also find that, like, do your kids have a favorite trip? Like, or do they say something like, maybe something that was like 5 years ago, or when they were like young, and they say, oh, I remember when we did this, and this country was so great, and that kind of surprised you a little bit that they have those kind of memories?
I think Vietnam, actually, and that's kind of why I focused a lot about it. That was a big one for us. I think it was just because of so many of the activities we did there were really hands-on, and really being we've done a lot of Europe before, so being in a culture that we weren't really used to they loved that. They really liked that. My daughter, though, I actually just asked her, and she said Prague, which I love because that's my favorite. So she's taken after me, and Italy. So she is very into more the European. They also loved Iceland, but they remember certain things about each one. So I think they've all been wonderful experiences. But I was going to say about the Australia thing. So, this could be considered maybe a bad parenting moment. I don't know. But Tyler, when oh gosh, he was so little, maybe 3, was obsessed with the Eiffel Tower. Every store he would go into, I don't know why, he just loved it. And my husband had a work trip planned to London. And so we thought, oh my gosh, we can use this as an opportunity to go with him and then take a side trip over to Paris. And yes, you feel kind of ridiculous letting your kids see this thing, this tangible item, and then go across the world to show them it. But, as I mentioned that story with that woman, he had the most amazing time in Paris. And I think that will forever be a wonderful country to him. So yeah, I would say if your daughter's talking about Australia, go do it.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a question, Laura.
Sure.
So do you also use TripAdvisor to find like some of the community events that, the ones that like give back to locals, or how do you find those usually, the ones that you let your kids get involved in when you're traveling?
Oh, for those, in terms of when we were at the orphanage and those sort of places, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's been a variety. Some of them was just planned ahead of time that we knew. One of them was one my husband was working. We were able to organize through his group. The other one, one time I know when we went to the Bahamas and we gave back there, I had started researching into, I think it's called World Central Kitchen, if I'm correct. And I know this is a company that you can really work in the kitchen and help prepare meals. And it was impossible to do. We couldn't get there based on the island we were staying at. So that kind of I just went down a rabbit hole and just kept researching and asking people questions. And I asked my host of where I was staying. And then it turned out that that particular place we were at a church, or we went through a church. So, honestly, for me, I just do a lot of research. But I think what I would recommend is I would reach out to the places you're staying at, whether that's the Airbnb or hotels, they're going to know. There's tons of different organizations. Some of the hotels, actually, a lot of them now are starting to have these partnerships where you can bring supplies directly to the hotels and they'll give back, or they'll have different opportunities. But just be aware, that you're actually donating to the communities and it's not really a business, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure there's like beach cleanups on resorts these days or hotels these days, which is like one of the easiest ways to.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point. You don't actually have to have something necessarily prepared for you. You can just go do it on your own, right? If you want to just to give back.
Everyone go pick up 45 pieces of trash.
Right.
Great.
All right. I see.
There was a really good question in the chat just now. I don't know if you have a chance to see it.
Yes, I see that from Deb. Do I do most of the trips during school breaks, or do I homeschool the kids and travel when I want? No, I do not homeschool. Actually, I had always wanted to live abroad with the kids or take a year off, and we never had that opportunity. And as the kids are now teenagers and in high school, it's just, it's not feasible. And it's not what I want them to have this high school experience here. Though I wish we had had that international experience as well. That said, yes, we have just been very smart in traveling at whatever school break we can have. When the kids were younger, they actually were in a year-round school, which was amazing because they had the month of kind of December, January off, the month of April off, and then a shorter summer. So when a lot of our trips were over that time frame and it wasn't as busy and not nearly as expensive. But yeah, we'll travel over spring break and summer. That's pretty much it. And I will pull the kids out of school. I told this story before. I don't know if anyone's ever said that, but when we went to Brazil and Argentina, the kids, or my daughter, she was in first grade. We were gone for 2 weeks and it was during school the whole time, but that was the time when we had to go. And I asked her teacher and I said, look, is this okay that we're doing this? And she said, you know what, your kids are going to learn so much more by being on that trip and experience what they have than, missing their reading and writing for the day. And it was so true. And I love that I had the support of the teacher behind me. So I think just go when you want. And then I will say when they're teens, oh my goodness, the schedules are so hard. So whatever opportunity you have, go. And wherever you have the opportunity, go, because the time keeps shrinking. I'm feeling that right now.
I would actually like to reinforce what you just said. Up until the end of our oldest being in grade 8, we just pulled them from school and went somewhere, usually in January or February. It was cheaper, you know, it was less crowded. It was nicer to be there when it wasn't like all kinds of other kids. High school was our cutoff. So basically, as soon as our oldest got into high school, then we had to start restricting ourselves to summers and breaks.
Yeah, and that's what we're finding too. And I think in the elementary and middle school years, it's easy to do. And they can, you know, the teachers will give that package of homework and they can do that on the plane and knock it out. And it's totally doable. And the experience that they're going to have are well worth the time that they miss from school, in my opinion. So don't be afraid to pull them out of school.
I don't have kids, but I remembered my friends would be would be like still in Cabo or Mexico, wherever, like a week after spring break was over. I'd be like, oh, Gabby's still like on vacation, like, you know. We used to do that. I don't have kids, so I'm not knowledgeable on this topic at all, and I don't, things have changed in 15 years, but they used to have programs like kind of like 3 to 6 week immersion exchange student programs. So I don't know if your kids have that at their school, Laura, if that's something that they're like interested in, or if schools are still running that. Obviously not past the past year, I guess. But
so they didn't have it in their elementary or middle schools, and I think their high school had it. But I think maybe with the pandemic now, it's kind of been put on the back burner. So I'm not sure if they're going to have that opportunity. But I have told my children that I really hope that they study abroad and get that experience. And I know my daughter, she's the oldest one. I know she is she's ready and itching to go. And what's great is she, you know, wants to maybe even stay with my friends or that live in Prague or Sevilla. So it's great to meet these locals because you never know where that can take you. You know, maybe you can have their kids come to you and your kids can go to them and vice versa.
yes. Awesome. Did anyone else have any other questions or comments, stories to share?
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned, Laura, early on that, like, you know, they get to an age where like an attitude kind of kicks in. Do you have any, did you just try to reel them in, I guess, or was it just like, okay, well, the kids are growing, you know, they're gonna do what they want to do? Like, to what extent did you say, well, I want to make sure they still have this love of travel, or that they are still, you know, willing and ready participants in this?
So the attitude is definitely hit in these, you know, late middle school to teen years. And I think it's, you know, kind of what I was saying before, they don't want to miss out on the opportunities here, which is always hilarious because when we go on the trips, that's when they're not missing out on anything anyway. And, you know, their experience is so much more fantastic when we're abroad or wherever we're going. I've just dealt with it. You know, I've kind of just listened to them. I acknowledge, I hear what they're saying, but they know that this is something that we do as a family. We always travel, the 4 of us. I get a little bit of pushback on that. They want to bring friends sometimes, but this, to me, our family is so go, go, go. And when we go to a different destination, this is our way to really just be together. I know it sounds so crazy to have to travel halfway across the world to have that moment, but it is. That's when we get to unplug and just really unwind and have these experiences of, you know, experiencing these different cultures together. So yes, in terms of the attitudes, they're gonna push back. They're not gonna want to go. But once there, and I'm telling you, every single time this happens, my daughter always says, "I'm so sorry, I was so tough on you, Mom, but I'm so glad you brought me on this trip. I had the most amazing experience." So they do. You just gotta get past that mental crazy block.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when I was in high school, I twice turned down trips that my parents wanted me to go on, and now I'm like, man, I regret it. And they hold it. My dad, who's like a huge traveler, that's where I get it from. It's like, so yeah, I gave you the opportunity. I'm like, yeah, I know. So that's what
You still think about it to this day, Ed?
Yeah, I'm like, well, I could have gotten a head start on all of this if I'd just taken advantage of these free opportunities to go see more of the world. So, so I think about that now, and that's, you know, I have maybe 10 years to think about it with my daughter, but I'm already thinking like when she's gonna start, like, you know, being her own person, which is great, of course, but like, you know, I'll probably use that experience let her know about that experience, and we'll see how it goes.
And Ed, I was going to say, I think for you, and this is kind of for me, you know, my kids know how passionate I am about this. And so they kind of get this level of excitement as well. You are so passionate about going to all these sporting venues. So for you, you know, bringing your child to this in different areas, she's going to see the excitement that you have and is going to want to experience that with you. And so I think that's one way that you can address it too. And you'll have fun doing those experiences together.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we'll see how it goes. I got some time to think about my strategy for this.
There's always attitude and crankiness, but you're going to have that at home anyway, you know, even if you just want to take them out to the movies or something. So
Sure.
just go for it.
Cool.
Shauna, you had another question?
Well, actually, I was, everybody go for just a second, but yes, I actually have a good story about dealing with attitude and crankiness. My son he can be a little difficult sometimes, and he's not particularly athletic. But when I was a kid and a teenager, right into my 20s, I used to hike in New Hampshire. And so I really wanted to share that experience with my kids, you know, stay in an alpine hut with them, do like a big hike. And we're not like a super active, super outdoorsy family. So I approached him before we left. Like, I gave him lots of time. About 2 months before we left, I said to him, Harris, I have a very serious favor to ask you. We're going hiking and it will be physically demanding. And I know it's not really your thing. So if you absolutely hate it, please just fake it for me. And, you know, honestly, I'm like, I've been wanting to share this experience with you kids. It's really important to me. Like, just, if I ask, do you want to do it again? No, that's okay. You know, but at the time, just fake it. And he did great. He was obviously suffering, kind of limping along by about halfway through the extra long day that we were hiking. And he was a real trooper. But I think if I hadn't addressed it with him ahead of time and prepared him for the fact it would be physically taxing, and I really didn't want to hear him complain about it, I think it would have been a different trip. But as it was fantastic.
That's so good to hear. And I think that's exactly it. You just had to, how you approached it made all the difference. So I love that story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. If anyone has any more questions, last chance to ask Laura. Otherwise, thank you so much, Laura, for this incredibly intimate and wonderful presentation and answering everyone's questions. I'm glad that everyone could get off mute and just have that like kind of one-on-one time with you, if you will.
Yeah, this is fun. That's what I love. I love getting to know all of you and your experiences as well. So thank you all so much for being here and taking your time out of the day to listen. And I really appreciate that too.
Yep, absolutely. I will go ahead and share my screen just for some final closing announcements, but thank you all so much for being here. If you have to jump off, I completely understand. We have our upcoming events for the Nomadic Network. A few happy hours this week and next week as well. These are like the next 9 events here. You'll see them. The ones outlined in orange are the speaking events in the book club. So you can head to that site to check out what we have in store for the summer. Tomorrow we have Faith Adiel. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce her last name. Book club, Meeting Faith. It's what is the Forced Journals of a Black Buddhist Nun. So it'll be really interesting. Nomadic Matt himself is hosting, which will be really fun to hear, to get your questions answered. And to prepare for next month, we have July 7th book club with Helen O'Kyra. I think that's how you pronounce her name, I'm hoping. Scotland Beyond the Bagpipes. So that'll be great. She'll come on. Her and Matt will answer all of your questions. You can head to nomadicnetwork.com/events to figure out how to purchase the book. And like I said earlier, members.nomadicmat.com is our new Patreon, if you will, but this is where you can get TNN event replays, all of the perks listed in bullet points right here, personal stories, input on the content, Q&As with Matt, I think he runs them every month, and access to an awesome Facebook group where we just ask each other advice and plan meetups and, you know, safe meetups and all different types of fun things that you wouldn't get if you know, weren't weren't a member. So again, thank you all for being here. It wouldn't be the same if it was just Laura and myself because I do not have any kids. So I'm just retaining the information for later. So I want to thank you. Next time we'd love